Hello everyone and welcome to the first week of the Ireland Esports Collegiate Series F124 season. I'm joined by Gib. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to the new season. It's going to be exciting. We've got a lot more people in this time than we did the last time, so it'll be interesting to see how everybody shakes up. Being that it's the first race, we might get somewhat of a better idea of where the grid might fall throughout the series. But it's always, with this few people, it's always everybody's in for points.
Yeah, especially this early on in the season. We're going to be starting off with the Bahrain Grand Prix. It is an 8-race season. I believe last time it was a little bit short. I think it was 5 races, so we have a lot more time to see how people shake out in this as well. So we're going to be hopping into qualifying very shortly. We're just getting the players in right now. They're all just getting their setups and everything done, so we should be hopping in very shortly. But what do you expect to see coming out of Bahrain here?
Well, Bahrain is quite a fast track. There's a lot of those straights, but there are a few corners that can kind of catch people off guard. Turn 10, which is that kind of hairpin coming down the hill from turn 9 into that hairpin, you can lose a lot of speed through there. And it's, there's a straight directly after it, but if you lose too much speed going into that, you're kind of cooked. And then on the flip side, if you go in with too much speed, you're just gonna miss the corner completely.
Yeah, so we are going to be doing I believe the format we're running for this evening is a short qualifying session followed by a half race. So it's 29 laps of Bahrain. We have the first drivers now heading out for their qualifying session. So we're going to throw it over to them now in just a second. I believe I did see a car just leave one of the paddocks. So we're going to see who that is. There we go. It is Freedom, of course, out first.
As always, yeah. Yeah, so the Bahrain, if you're not familiar with it, there's 15 turns or corners, depending on how you want to see them. He's getting a little bit of heat into his tires there. So turn 1 and 2, you can carry a lot of speed going in through them. Turn 3, again, a lot of speed. And then there's a straight all the way down until turn 4, which is a bit of a hairpin turn. You got to slow down quite a bit for that. Down into turn 5, 6, and 7, you can carry a lot of speed going through them. Into turn 8, which you have to slow down quite a lot for, which brings you down into turn 9 and turn 10, which are those tricky ones I talked about a minute ago. Down another DRS zone into turn 11, which 11, 12, you can carry a lot of speed up the hill through them and then have to slow down into turn 13, another big long straight, and down into turn 14, which you have to slow down quite a bit for because of that speed you're having down that straight, into turn 15, and then down past the stop line.
Yeah, as Freedom's now coming up towards the end of his outlap, and I believe the rest of the races for this evening are following behind him as well. They're all out at the moment, getting ready to go. But I guess we'll stick with Freedom during this first flying lap here, so that we can see where the bar has been set. I believe Freedom won our previous series. Of course, this series being open to both current students and alumni this season, so have a little bit bigger of a player base as we go into it. But Freedom now starting off on his outlap, doing nicely in that first corner. Now as he comes down this long straight, takes the corner quite nicely, gets in tight.
Carrying a lot of speed through those turns there. Coming down into turn 8, I believe. Down that straight. And here's this downhill section with turn 9 and 10. And there's turn 10. And it can catch a lot of people out if they're not paying attention.
Yeah, it took that very tricky corner very, very nicely, carried a lot of speed through it into the DRS zone to be able to come out of this now, carrying just so much speed throughout through this second sector, and it's really going to help as he goes into these final few corners.
Yeah, he's carrying a lot of speed. You can see he's kind of got that speed mentality of push, and he's holding his own very well out there on track, taking a lot of these turns very tightly. and using all of the track to his advantage.
And he should cross the line just in a second. There it is at a 1:28. Very, very good first lap for him. But now we can jump up the speeder. There's been a caution in sector 1 and sector 3, so I assume someone has gone wide. Kai now, I believe, on his flying lap just started it. As we go to the onboard camera this time. But actually, it looks like Speeder is going to be taking away that that pole position from Freedom to start
127.9.
127.9, yeah, very, very nice for him.
And Obituary there with a 130.
Yeah, 130 from Obituary. Kai now trying to carry as much speed as they can throughout the sector 2. Doing a little bit of nice braking from Kai to be able to carry as much speed as he can going around that corner. And now as we come down towards the start-finish straight, we'll see how they take this. Nicely done. Let's see what time we're looking at. It's looking at like a 127 right now. Ooh, it's gonna be a 129.3. Putting them fourth on that second row so far. Still with Ella left to complete their first flying lap.
These are all very competitive times from everybody. They're very closely bunched, which is nice to see that we've got that competitiveness between the drivers here.
Yeah, Freedom now going back in towards going back into the pit lane as we see the drivers who have been out for the first flying lap starting to come in now. Speeder just coming in from his back in from his first lap. I assume Freedom's going to go out pretty soon here after this after his hit.
It'll be interesting to see where Ella places on this and see where they can kind of shake up the leaderboard, its current standings.
Yeah, definitely could push someone out of that first row. Still has the potential to do so. Oh, but spins and it actually
spin.
Yeah, that's going to be had to retire from the session. That's a lot of damage. I believe if I double check, I have the rules here actually. Let me just open them up here so I am making sure that I have this correct. I do believe that we have realistic damage on, and realistic driving aids, or not all realistic driving aids, but a lot of them are turned on. So a big crash like that will have you retired from a session. You can't just spawn back in the pit box and go again. So you do still have to be careful during these qualifying sessions, because you could just, like we just saw from Mello there, you could spin it early on and then you are stuck watching for the rest of the qualifying session. There's 10 minutes remaining. I've seen someone leave there now. I think that may have been Kai again. We will double check. It's actually Obituary going out for his second out lap of this qualifying session, looking to get out of that P5 position.
Yeah, probably trying to aim for that front row, but I'd say would be happy with the second row as well. And unfortunately, Ella's, as you say, is out of this session. And it looked to me that they came round in turn 10, tried to, maybe lost a bit of grip there and tried to recover and just spun into the wall there.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, and that is that did happen to Ella on that tricky turn. I believe it's turn 9 there that we just saw Obituary go around. I believe that it is a tricky corner to get. You lock up so easily on that corner, and it will just send you either way off into the distance, or you'll just spin out and potentially hit a wall. So have to be very careful.
Yeah, it is that downhill into turn 10 that really catches you out, because it's after turn 8, which has a little bit of a straight before it, or after it, sorry, and then into turn 9 you got to slow down a little bit, but you've got to keep up that speed so you're not losing too much going around turn 10. But like you say, you're either off in the distance or you're in the wall, and it's a really difficult one to master.
Ella saying there in the chat that they opened the DRS and pulled a Mazepin, so unfortunate qualifying for them there. Hopefully can have a better time out in the actual race itself, but now seeing a lot of people out. Keep in mind, Obituary is on his flying lap, so people are gonna have to move out of the way from him here if he does manage to catch up with them. So gonna take the chicane very nicely as we come down to this very tight right hand corner. You have to slow down a good bit for this, and then as we say, we go into this really difficult left-hander that catches a lot of people out. This causes a lot of lockups. Takes it very nicely though as we go into the second DRS zone, and there we go. We see, I believe that's Kai moving out of the way. You can that caution is just for Kai there. Slow down a bit too much to allow Obituary to be passed, so that yellow flag will be cleared.
Yeah, and that was Obituary's got a good run on this lap. Definitely holding a lot of speed going through some of those corners, and that's what you like to see. And you like to see Kai moving out of the way, giving him that space to finish out his outlap.
We do have a yellow flag in sector 1. I believe that's probably someone on their outlap. Kai now coming down the start finish straight to begin his flying lap. And Obituary not going to be able to improve. Got to stay in the 130s. So currently still going to be in P5. Still has the opportunity, 7 minutes left, to be able to finish off this in lap. Go out right over, try to go out for one final attempt to see if he can break out of that P5 position. Meanwhile, Speeder, who's currently in P1, gonna see if he can improve on that time, keep Freedom at bay. A lot of speed being carried around now. Has to be careful not to hit into the back of, I believe that's Obituary, who's in front of him. Bit of a slide, yeah, like you said. Obituary is gonna have to move out of the way here during this start finish straight, and he does so.
Good sportsmanship, we love to see it.
A bit of
bit jittery there.
Yeah, coming out from Speeder, but will carry it through nicely, carrying a lot of speed throughout this lap. Of course, got him get he's only, you know, he's only about half a second or a second and a half ahead of Freedom in their first flying laps. So has to make sure that he does his best here. Doesn't want to lose any speed through some small mistakes. We obviously said we obviously saw a little bit of a slide from him early on in this flying lap. He's actually gonna cancel it. He's not gonna finish out that lap. Knew that he made a few mistakes. Freedom now, who's on his own flying lap, has a lot more free air in front of him. Not many people out on the track. He waited just a little bit longer to start his outlap, and it means that the track is completely free for him. I think he may have locked up a little bit there though. We'll have to see.
He seems to be carrying a lot of speed through these corners, but also locking up quite a bit with some very heavy braking on some of these turns. Who is he catching up to there?
I believe that's Nico, or yeah, it's either Nico or Kai. It is Kai.
I think it might be Kai there.
Yeah, Kai's going to move out of the way there.
I'll let him pass.
I think Kai has canceled his flying lap as well, so he's probably going to be heading back to the pit here. Freedom. We're going to see whether he decides to finish out this flying lap or if he's going to use it just kind of to get his bearings again. And a little bit of a lockup going into that corner as well. Looks like he's going to be sticking it out though, going to see if he can pass that time from Speeder, and sets a 1:27.7. So 0.2 of a second faster than Speeder. Speeder now going to have to respond. Freedom may have enough time to pit and go out again. I don't know if he's going to be able to hit the start finish line in time on another outlap, but it's all going to come down to whether to Speeder and what he can get done.
It'll be interesting to see in the actual race the battle between Freedom and Speeder, being that in their times on qualifying they are so close, like you said, 0.2 of a second between them. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see that almost rivalry starting to brew and will it be able to continue throughout the rest of the series?
Outlap now again for Obituary, who didn't have a great time out last time, and didn't have an improvement, but you know, was also, like I said, was stuck in a little bit of traffic, and I would think everybody kind of suffered from that a little bit in this qualifying session, just getting into the traffic at the worst possible corner to have traffic on, and not necessarily being impeded, but you know, just having to be that little bit more aware of people around you and things like that. So now with a little bit more free air in front of him, should be able to go for this. But again, he's going to be coming at a weird time. He will be starting his flying lap into traffic, because everybody's going to be trying to bolt out of the gates here to try get around for that one last flying lap.
Yeah, and it's going to cause a little bit of traffic there coming out of the pits, I presume. And it's not necessarily impede his time, but it might have a little bit of an impact. Hopefully he can get out past the pit lane there before everybody comes out. He's coming down into the final turn before the start-stop line.
Yeah, and as he begins his flying lap, we can see that the only one else out on the track right now is Kai, who left the pits about 40 seconds ago, so he should almost be done his out lap. But now we're going to stick with Obituary, see if he can get out of this P5 position. Rides the curb a little bit too much there coming out of it, so that will affect his speed down this DRS straight, but it's all going to be down to how much speed they can carry through these corners. Of course, Bahrain, a very technical track, all about carrying as much of the speed as you can through these medium speed corners. And you know, going to be slowing down for this tight one. Doesn't lock up, does a great job, uses the curb to be able to get around that one. Now as they come down
into
to
turn 9 and turn 10, the dreaded turn 10.
No lock up, very well done from Obituary, better than he has done so far in this.
Carried a great deal of speed through that compared to his previous laps.
As we jump to the onboard for Obituary, so we can take a quick look at that speed, you know, carrying 150 kilometers an hour around this, 170, locks up a little bit going into it, just breaking that a little bit too hard, but now up to 180, 190, 300 as he comes down towards the start finish straight. We're going to see whether he can break that 130. Can he get down into the 129s? Keep in mind, he is currently a second and a half behind Kai. It's only going to be a tenth of a second improvement on his previous time, and that will be him locked into P5.
Yeah, and that's tough when you give a lap your all and you only improve just a marginal bit amount, but it's still an improvement, and that's one way to look at it, is I have improved on this lap compared to my previous attempts.
Now as we go to, and I believe Speeder just started. Yeah, Speeder has just started his flying lap, so we're gonna stick with him for the time being. Freedom is also on an out lap. Actually, we may just jump to Freedom. See, yeah, he's gonna make it to the start finish before that, before the checkered flag. So Freedom will also be on a flying lap here. It's gonna come down to this final lap. Any mistakes here could cost a pole for either of these drivers.
Speeder carrying a lot of speed through those corners there.
Oh, he had a bit of a, got a bit wobbly coming out of that corner. Will cost him a little bit of time. See if he locks up
Down
here.
into the hairpin.
Manages to do the hairpin beautifully. And it looks like Kai, I think he may have finished his flying lap, but he didn't get an improvement, so will be P4. It's all going to come down to Nico, Speeder, and Freedom, all still on their flying lap here. Nico's got to be the one to finish their flying lap first. So we will quickly jump to Nico as he comes down the start finish straight. Doesn't manage to improve, but he's on a 128.5. Following him is Speeder, who's got to jump into pole with a 127.5. Freedom now riding the curb just a little bit much coming down these last few corners. Gonna go down this straight. One final corner before it locks up once again. Has been hitting these brakes just a little bit too hard. That might cost him. Now as he goes across the start finish line, we're going to see didn't actually say. It's going to be Freedom on pole, manages to break that time. I didn't actually get to see what the pole time was there. We'll get to see it now. Oh, a 10 oh, 0.7 of a, or 0.10 of a second down. Freedom, that was extremely close. But yeah, we're going to be hopping into the race very shortly. We just have to make sure everyone is ready to go with our qualifying session done. So that is going to be Freedom on pole, Speeder in second, Nico in third, Kai in fourth, Obituary in fifth, and Ella in sixth. And we're going to see how this race start goes, because as you said, I think Freedom and Speeder are going to be fighting it out throughout the start of this one.
Yeah, it definitely seems that based on qualifying, Speeder and Freedom are obviously the two fastest, being that they're in the first row. But it's going to be almost a rivalry between the two of them. And can the other drivers use that battle ahead of them to make up that gap and kind of take advantage of that battle happening ahead of them?
Yeah, as we just wait for everyone to connect and get ready to go. And so yeah, we'll throw to just a quick 2-minute or so break while we get set up for our race. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Hello everyone and welcome back. We are ready. We are starting our formation lap for this race. Bahrain being, our first race of the season. Actually while we're just getting through this formation lap, I will quickly grab the rule book and I will get what our next few races are. Oh, if you have them, yeah. Nerve, yeah. Very, very nice. And as we saw pop up there, tire strategies, of course, this is a half of the full F1 race. So it is 29 laps, so there will be pit stops. The tire wear, of course, very heavy on this track, especially with the heat. Even though it is at night, still a lot of heat here in Bahrain. So we're seeing a couple of people on softs. We're seeing Freedom start out on mediums. There's a couple different tire strategies available. We'll probably see about 13 or so laps out of those mediums, and I think it's about 10 out of the softs potentially. So I think it may be a 2-stop. Now, as we head into our starting grid here, and I believe Kai had a false, I think he overshot the pit box. It has reset him though, and we're going to be, lights are going up and they are gone, and we have all started. Freedom going to be starting off very well here, trying to defend away from Speeder. Speeder's actually managed to get a better start and has gone down the inside of Freedom, so going to be able to take over that pole position. Nico has also moved up. Nico and Kai also fighting for third, but I believe that was Kai. Kai has just gone into a wall there, or it was Nico, sorry. Nico went wide and went into the wall, so safety car gonna come out. VSC is gonna slow down this first lap. Unfortunate start for Nico. I believe he was battling with Kai there, and I don't know whether he got bumped or what, but he went very, very quickly left into a wall. I believe he managed to, I don't think he was carrying so much speed because they were just coming out of a corner, so I don't think he actually hit the wall to the point where he would be out of the race, but because I can see him starting to catch up with everyone else now, so bit of an unfortunate start for him, but virtual safety car coming out on the first lap of the race. And virtual safety car has come in, so Speeder gonna have to take off now, try to make some distance away from Freedom. Of course, as normal F1 rules, that DRS is going to be available from lap number 2, so he wants to try to get a move on, try to get as much of a gap away from the group as he can. But Freedom breathing down his neck already, looking to see if he can make a move. Of course, Freedom on those slower tires to start, but as these few laps go on, Freedom will start to gain a little bit of pace on those soft tires, and Speeder going to set the fastest lap, starting off a 1:43. And we will of course see how that goes down throughout the race. But now DRS enabled, and it's going to be a DRS train for the first 3 drivers. Obituaries, I think he's out of the detection zone for DRS, so there will be a bit of a break between the front and the front half and the second half of the pack. Yeah, Nico having to pit. I believe he may have got front wing damage from that little bump he had on the wall. Had to pit for that. So now 40 seconds down on the rest of the field. I noticed there in that second DRS zone, Kai not able to hit it in time, so did end up falling out of that DRS train, and now it's a 2-second gap between Kai and Freedom, and then another 2-second gap between Obituary and Kai. So Ella going to be trying to fight for that P4 position for the time being, but meanwhile up front, our pole setter Freedom fighting to try get back that first position, and Speeder is definitely not making it easy for him.
Off the line, and Freedom is having to claw his way back into that P1 spot. But Speeder is able to keep him around 0.5, 0.6 of a second behind him. For this, while we're on lap 3 now, coming down into turn 10, he's taking that very close, and Freedom right on his tails.
Yeah, as they come down, DRS as well, still for Freedom. The big thing here for Freedom, because Speeder is doing really well on these soft tires, just making sure he keeps up the pace, using the space he's able to get from, you know, these gaps in between the DRS zones to keep Freedom at bay for the time being. And of course, like I said, those soft tires will start wearing a lot faster than those mediums, so needs to try to get out of that DRS if he can before the softs start to fall off and Freedom has the advantage.
Yeah, and Freedom's definitely going to have that advantage in the pit strategy for the time being that, you know, Speeder is on those softs, and his tires aren't going to hold out as long as Freedom's are. And it's all going to come down to, can he open up that gap enough to keep Freedom away from him, for that when he goes into the pits, he has that chance to kind of make up that time.
Ella, while we were looking at Freedom and Speeder, just managed to take Obituary on that start-finish straight, going a bit wide here. Ella using as much of the track as possible to be able to, you know, keep Obituary behind him. Caution in sector 3, and Nico is spun once again. Unfortunate for him, has to spin back around, but luckily none of the other racers there, so not going to cause any issues for the remainder of the race. Speeder been with a nice bit of a slide into that corner. We'll lose a little bit of speed for it, because we've seen how well Freedom has been taking that tight hairpin, and that little bit of a slide gonna, you know, let him catch up about a tenth of a second. So Freedom once again just trying to keep as close to him as he can for the time being. Obituary has now fallen down almost 2 seconds behind Ella after that overtake. So we're gonna have to see whether Ella can start to make up some time on Kai as well. Very late braking coming in from Freedom there, locks up a little bit on the exit, and now trying to use that little bit of momentum he carried through that corner to try to catch up to Speeder. Speeder going to use the ERS system, that electronic boost, to keep Freedom behind. It looked like he was catching for a second, but I believe he potentially dumped his battery to just keep out front.
Yeah, and it seems that, you know, Speeder is very capable in these turns, but Freedom is carrying a lot more speed, but then heavy on the brakes, which is going to cost him time, but also will help him kind of close that gap a little bit incrementally throughout the corners.
Yeah, but the big thing about that as well, with the heavy braking that we're seeing, like there's another little bit of smoke coming out away from Freedom, is that every time Freedom has these locks ups, that tire wear is going to get worse and worse. There's another lockup from Freedom, and every time that happens, it means that Speeder going to that picking those soft tires is going to keep gaining benefit every time the tire wear for Freedom goes down.
Yeah, I feel like Freedom is a man after my own heart with his driving style, in that it's aggressively push and not worry about the tires as much. As we see another lockup coming through that corner, and like you said, it's gonna affect his pit strategy here.
He's still gaining a lot of time, though. Potentially, I don't think all of these smoke trails are lockups. I think it's also to do with the assists that are in place. There's some options for we're not completely, you know, simulation on all of the rules. So it could potentially be that Speeder is using more laxed rules and Freedom is using more realistic rules. It could just be that that's why we're seeing a lot more smoke coming from Freedom. But we'll have to see when they actually decide to pit here, because if it is the case that he is having a lot of these kind of semi lockups, and he's very close here, he's going to try for the overtake, tries to go down the inside, but Speeder very quick to cut that one off.
Yeah, and we're now 6 laps into this race, so Speeder's going to be thinking about when he's going to pit pretty soon. You know, those soft tires won't hold out for a lot longer, not for much longer, and Freedom on those mediums is going to have that advantage of Speeder going into the pits.
Freedom going
very
really
wide
there. That will cost him. That all that time he's been gaining back, like we've seen, he was almost down the inside of him after that on that DRS on the first DRS zone. So going wide there going to cost him a little bit of time, meaning he may potentially not be able to mount another attack this lap. But for Speeder, definitely seems to be losing a good bit of time, and I do think it comes down to his defensive strategy here. I do think he used a lot of the battery to keep Freedom behind him a little bit earlier on, and I think that's potentially costing him here as we now go down this DRS zone, only at 0.3 of a second behind for Freedom. He could potentially go for an attack here.
Freedom's definitely looking to make that move. He's right on his rear bumper, going down the outside there.
You can see the tire performance there on the right hand side. Both of them very even. Speeder actually going to get a bit squirmy on the back end there and will concede first place to Freedom.
Yeah, we saw that attack from Freedom mounting. We saw it on that DRS zone in the previous lap, and he's just going to take advantage of Speeder not quite having the control through that corner and sliding a little bit.
The one thing we did notice as well from that little tire performance checkup that we saw pop up on that right hand side of your screen was the fact that Speeder's tires were very comparable to Freedom's. They were only about 5 or 6% higher or they were a little bit higher in the fronts. His front left was a lot worse than Freedom's, but the other three pretty comparable. Only about 6 or 7% degradation in the difference. So we're just gonna have to see how much that actually plays into a factor. Like we said, if you're going to be wearing out that front left tire over and over on this track, you're gonna have to pit a little quicker. And in section 2, we're seeing another yellow flag here. I believe Obituary may have gone wide there. Nico still just trying to catch up as much as he can. Now as we come down the start finish straight again, Speeder potentially trying to go to try to take back this pole position, but just gonna mount it right at the end, try to take him down the inside of the corner. Freedom on the outside, and a bit of contact there, I believe, between the two drivers, but Freedom manages to come out on top. And We saw as well there pop up on the right hand side. We're now in the pit window for those soft tires. Between 8 and 11 laps is that pit window, or the optimal window for those pit stops. So we potentially are going to see a pit stop from Speeder early on here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we try to see him, you know, try to get back into this first position before his pit stop, just so that he has that little bit of a time advantage to try catch up on Freedom, because I assume after this he may be going on to either another set of softs or onto those mediums.
Yeah, and while we've been talking a lot about Freedom and Speeder, I've noticed that the gap between Mini Kai and Ella has been closed quite significantly. Bearing in mind, a couple laps ago, Ella was 4 seconds behind, and now she's 4/10 of a second behind. So very competitively closing that gap and trying to put that push on for P3 in this race.
Yeah, has DRS down the straight as well, trying to now only 2/10 of a second, 2.5 tenths of a second behind Kai, so potentially could mount an attack down the start finish straight here, similar to what we've seen from Freedom. We have a yellow flag in sector 1 once again. I believe that may be Nico, or yeah, I think it must be Nico. 10-second penalty for Speeder speeding in the pit lane, so he actually got to hop into the pit lane but didn't hit that 80-kilometer break point in the pit lane, so will receive a 10-second penalty. Also, and while that was happening, Ella actually managing to take Kai, because Kai was on those softs as well, had to jump in, and an Obituary as well, another one not hitting that 80-kilometer-hour limit before entering the pit lane, and will also receive a 10-second time penalty.
Wow, this is really shaking up the scoreboard there. Ella's now gone into P2 now. He's 11 seconds behind Freedom, and then Speeder now, with his 10-second penalty, is going to have a lot of ground to catch up. Again, as with Obituary there. Was it Obituary that also got a 10-second penalty there? So going to have a lot of time to catch up here.
And the big thing as well, I didn't actually notice up until this point, Ella actually decided to start on those hard tires, which means they can stay out and try to build a gap here with that 10-second time penalty after now passing Kai. I believe Kai may have Kai pitted during that last lap there. He's now on I think he's now moved on to soft tires. We can actually double check. He's actually gone on to mediums there. So Ella starting out on those hard tires means that if she can use these 2 time penalties to their advantage and try to go, you know, go a little bit long on these hard tires, potentially finish on those softs, and just try to stay in these in the podium positions.
And that's a great tire strategy going there. It's starting off with the hards and kind of being able to stay out longer than your competitors, and having that kind of time when they're in the pits to kind of create a gap between yourself and them.
And the big thing here, Speeder now has caught up about a second and a half on Ella since swapping over to these fresh medium tires. Meanwhile, Freedom still out on his first set, has extended the gap between himself and Ella by about a second and a half as well. So he's doing a great job of just trying to keep the pack behind him and just trying to stay out for as long as he can. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him pit in about 2 laps time, as we did see his tire degradation was only a slight bit lower than Speeder's, and Speeder has already pitted, so it should be almost time for Freedom to come in. But meanwhile, Ella is going to be able to stay out, and once again, with those 10-second time penalties, should be able to potentially build a little bit of a time gap between the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th places here.
Yeah, we see Speeder coming around that corner, turn 10, sorry, kind of closing that gap between himself and Ella, and although having that time penalty, is going to try and push for that gap to close.
The big thing here is the amount of time Speeder is able to catch up on Freedom here before Freedom goes for that pit stop, because he can, you know, get out and ahead of him, because he's currently 17 seconds behind Freedom, and I believe it's about a 22-second time, 22 seconds for a regular pit stop or around that. Maybe a tiny bit more. So Speeder actually going to set the fastest lap as well on 1:31. But of course still carrying a lot of fuel, so that time will continuously go down. But the more time he can shave off between him and Freedom before Freedom pits, the better.
Yeah, he'll have that Freedom won't have that advantage of having to go into the pits. Like you said, it's around 21, 22 seconds for a normal pit. And, you know, being able to close that gap is probably what Speeder's focusing on at the moment, being that it is around a 16-second gap between himself and pole position.
The big thing for Freedom is making sure that he doesn't make the same mistake that Speeder and Obituary did. He has to make sure he does not hit that, break that speed limit in that pit lane, because at the moment he has that advantage of that 10-second time penalty on Speeder, meaning that, you know, his normal 21-second pit stop, you know, actually still puts, currently with 13 seconds between them, still actually that 10-second time penalty puts him about even. He can still actually pit and still end up just ahead of Speeder, even if he ends up in second place. As long as he can stay with Speeder, he will always be ahead because of that 10-second time penalty. Pack is now spread out quite a bit. It's currently just Speeder catching up with Ella, who's going in the start finish straight right now, and we're actually going to see Freedom go for his pit stop now. It does mean that Ella and Speeder are going to pass him now, but as we said, I think we had an issue with Freedom. We will have to see what happened there, but I believe Freedom may have had a pit stop issue or a setup issue or something. We will keep you posted on that. He's now back out on the track. No, he's just losing time. So I don't know whether we had a disconnection from Freedom there. If we did, that is extremely unfortunate. But we will have to keep an eye on it. No, he is back on the track. So I believe it was just potentially a viewer, a spectator bug or something like that. But he's back on the track now. Will be popping out onto those, I believe it's hard tires for Freedom, so he's not going to be going, or maybe going for hards for the middle section of his race, and maybe he's going to try to finish the last 8 or so laps on softs. Maybe he's going for that 3-tire strategy, but now Speeder has caught up to Ella, and because of that long pit stop from Freedom, he's actually 10 seconds behind Speeder, like we said. So that 10-second time penalty will matter quite a bit, but Speeder, the longer Ella keeps Speeder behind him, it's actually better for Freedom.
Yeah, the longer that Speeder is fighting Ella, the more time Freedom has to catch up and reduce that 10-second time gap quite a bit. And we have seen Freedom is very aggressive going into these corners, braking very hard. Like, I think I saw him in the background of that, going around that last turn there. So he is putting the pace on us.
And Ella just going to have to concede this first place position. Too much speed coming out of Speeder with those fresh medium tires, and Freedom obviously going onto those hard tires potentially strategically, because we've seen what he does to the wear on the tires. So potentially going for those hard tires so that he can wear them down that little bit more throughout this second stint.
Yeah, it could possibly be in the back of his mind. His strategy is now, okay, I'm very hard on on the mediums. Let me change to a hard. I can brake more aggressively going into a lot of these corners and still stay out longer than I would have done on those mediums beforehand.
Now, big gap coming in from Speeder, almost 2 seconds on Ella so far in this first place position. As we move back down the grid, Ella, of course, second and about 2 seconds behind, so out of DRS range from Speeder, so we'll have to just carry out the rest of the stint. Try to stay ahead of, as far ahead of Freedom as she can before they go for their pit stop. Freedom, of course, in third, about 11 seconds behind, behind Speeder at the moment. Obviously, just coming out on those hards, which take a little bit longer to warm up and will last out longer, so potentially he may go the entire rest of the race on these. We will have to see. Currently Ella has done 13 laps on their hards, so we will see what time when Ella actually opts to go for that pit stop, and that will kind of give us a judge on how long. Oh, big mistake coming out from Freedom there. Big lockup, gonna cause him to go super wide, and that's gonna, we're playing with very small margins here for Freedom. He already had that little bit of a pit stop error where he lost a bit of time, and a big mistakes like that keep increasing that gap between him and Speeder. He has that 10-second buffer because of that pit stop penalty, but he has to make sure he doesn't make any more mistakes like that.
Yeah, that was a big wide from him, and I presume what happened was he went in with too much speed. He tried late braking, and it just didn't play out the way he wanted it, and has gonna have a bit of an effect on his time, but he is still closing that gap between himself and Ella.
Kai, haven't really seen too much from Kai ever since they were overtaken by Ella. Now just going through the first sector of this lap, but 8 seconds behind Freedom. I believe he is on his second stint of tires, so is gaining a little bit of time, trying to just, he's staying within kind of the 8 to 9 seconds gap between himself and Freedom. Obviously on a slightly faster tire than Freedom, but they are slightly older. They're a couple laps older. Meanwhile, behind them we have Obituary, who of course had a bit of a rough, I think he had the 10-second time penalty from the pit stop, as well as just a bit of a rough kind of after that kind of 5 or 6 lap mark, just had a bit of a rough time. And Nico, who hasn't really been able to recover from that first mistake, you know, heading towards that wall, having to take that first extra pit stop, and then of course spinning out as well on another lap. So you can see actually Speeder now getting very close to lapping out Nico.
Yeah, and that's tough for Nico, being that they made a mistake on the first turn and just haven't really been able to recover from it. And then again, having another spin later on in the race. And it's just, you got to think about where their head's at. You know, they're probably thinking, I want to finish this race. I want to, you know, do my part. I'm happy to take my, however many points it is for 6th place in this, and, you know, just be done with this day. But definitely a hard race for them. And we're here with Speeder, who is in P1 still, opening that gap between himself and Ella, but still having that time penalty to worry about. Freedom is definitely closing in the gap between himself and Ella, bringing it down to a 3-second gap, which means the gap between himself and Speeder is now at
about
11 seconds.
Yeah, about
11 seconds.
Yeah. No, the big thing for
Sorry,
Ella
my maths
here
is very bad.
That's fine. The one thing for about Ella is Ella has stayed out on these hard tires, which is fine, but keep in mind that everyone else is now beginning to, you know, close that gap. You can see Kai's about 13 seconds or so behind Ella, and as we said, a regular pit stop's about 20 seconds. So now as she comes into the pit on that 16th lap, it means that we kind of get the gist. About 16 laps worth of wear out of those hard tires. We know Freedom is on those hard tires now. So with 16 laps, he changed over onto hards at around lap 13. He has the potential to kind of go for a 2-stop if he wants to, but we're gonna have to see now. Yeah, and as we see, Ella's gonna come out behind Kai due to staying out on those hard tires. So we're gonna have to see whether Ella can actually close the gap to Kai once again.
Yeah, and that's a substantial gap between themselves and Kai. I think they're out of the pits now, and has about a 10-second gap between themselves and Kai, which is substantial enough. Now, we have seen Ella be able to kind of keep that pace that they were on, but it'll be interesting to see, can they close that gap between themselves and Kai? And bear in mind, there was a battle between the two of them earlier on in the race. But being on those fresh tires will definitely give themselves an advantage.
Yeah, Ella choosing mediums here for this second stint. I do believe this is probably going to be a 3-stop for a lot of these racers here. Still, I believe, I do think she could potentially go for a 2-stop here. Has the same kind of strategy as for the reverse strategy of Freedom potentially, where those mediums may last the rest of the race here. So should be able to potentially go for it here, where I do think Speeder will potentially go for that 3-stop and actually stop for the second, for a third stint, and go for another set of soft tires to finish out the race. With that 10-second time penalty, I don't know if it's worth it, but we'll have to see.
Between Freedom and Speeder's kind of stayed around the same place, even, you know, with Freedom being able to take those positions up to P2 with pit stops in mind, taking P2 from Ella because of that pit stop. The gap between himself and Speeder has stayed consistently around like 10 to 12 seconds throughout these last couple of laps. And although Speeder does have the the 10-second penalty, it'll be interesting to see, can he kind of keep that gap going?
Yeah, Speeder now still carrying a lot of speed throughout these laps and doing his best to try to keep that gap between himself and Freedom as far as possible. It's currently at about 10 and a half seconds, although Freedom is starting to whittle it down slowly, and we have seen how aggressive Freedom is. It was in those battles, so now with no one in front of him, going to be able to just take the corners as, you know, as aggressively as he wants, not having to worry about hitting into anyone. As Freedom now, or Speeder, coming down the straight to start off his 18th lap. And Freedom, as you can see at the back of the straight there, 10 seconds behind, as we see a caution in sector 1. We're going to see who that is. I believe that was just someone potentially going wide, so that should be sorted out.
Caution in sector 1. Speeder there taking a lot of speed going through that turn.
And then Nico there finally being lapped by Speeder as well. So I believe that caution was maybe just Nico moving out of the way, going out of track limits, just to maybe just moving out of the way for Speeder, making sure he doesn't impede, doesn't want to, you know,
the Kai in the pits there.
Yeah, pit stop for Kai actually coming out once again. Did he swap onto? I believe we have Obituary also going in. Did he come out? What tires is he going onto? He's gone out onto hard tires, so that is the second pit stop for Kai. So he went from, I believe he started on mediums, went to softs for about 8 laps, and now he's going on hards for the final stint.
And he'll be wanting to keep those tires for the rest of the race and kind of not use too much of them, not be getting down into those dangerous areas of losing grip in the wear condition.
And we will see as well, I believe that may be Speeder in the back there. Hards as well for Obituary, so very similar 3-stop strat, or 2-stop strat. They're going to be finishing on these hard tires with about 10 laps remaining. So we have seen that those hard tires can go for a bit longer, so they potentially could have gone for that 2-stop, but we will actually see whether any of these racers, I think Ella and Freedom are pretty well set up for a 2-stop here, so we'll have to see whether they go for it. But Speeder now starting to Freedom now starting to close that gap. Now a second caught up between Freedom and Speeder, and as long as Freedom stays within that 10-second gap behind Speeder has something to worry about.
Yeah, and I think Speeder had a little bit of a slide coming out of that turn there, down into turn 10, the tricky turn that we've seen catch people out today. And yeah, like you said, Freedom is hot on his tails, but with that 10-second penalty that Speeder has, he's kind of worried at the moment. You know, Freedom is catching up lap by lap to Speeder, closing down that gap and putting him in the danger zone with that time penalty.
The big thing here as well is if it is right that Ella went for this 2-stop, that tire strategy may have just gained them an extra position, because we saw them overtake Kai, and then with how the pit stop shaked out, it meant that Ella was actually behind Kai for a little bit. But now with that third pit stop coming in from Kai, it means that Ella's up ahead, but Speeder going to be coming in for his final pit of the race, and this is probably the softs. He is going back onto medium, so he's not going to risk the soft tires, because he knows he's potentially going to be in a battle with Freedom or Ella for that P2 position. So going to have to serve that 10-second time penalty. Still, I believe, ahead of Ella for the time being, but we'll have to see. The time is being cut down though. Oh, it's going to be a very close on pit exit. Ella will be able to take Speeder, but now it's going to be a battle for P2, and Speeder has a lot of work if he wants to try to catch up to Freedom, who I do think is going to go for this two-stop.
Yeah, I think that Freedom now has that space to kind of, you know, keep that pace going, but ease off the late braking and wear on those hard tires as much as he has been, being that Ella is 22 seconds behind and Speeder is 24 seconds behind. So definitely has that space to stretch his legs a little bit and not be as harsh on those hard tires.
Yeah, this is going to come down to who, at this point, I believe, as long if Freedom and Ella decide to go for this one-stop strategy, it's really got to come down to Speeder here. Can he take back this P2 and potentially even threaten that P1? But like you said, being 23 or so seconds behind Freedom now, because like we said, a pit stop's about 20 seconds worth of time. As long as Freedom can keep these hard tires good enough for the rest of this race and just manage to keep Speeder behind him, he should be good to go.
Yeah, I feel like the rest of this race is going to come down to tire strategy and tire management. You know, Freedom has to be careful not to wear down those hards as much as he did with those mediums. You know, he blasted through them. As we had seen, his tire wear between himself and Speeder were very comparable before that first pit stop. So it's going to be interesting to see how he manages to go out with the rest of the race, and will he go for another pit stop, being that he has about 22 seconds between himself and Speeder.
Nico now actually opting to pit, gonna move out of the way and let the racers race, so will once again be lapped by Ella and Speeder. Now as Speeder has broken the has broken into the DRS detection zone, so Ella gonna have to be on the defensive here, has to try to keep Speeder behind him. There, but a
bit of contact,
and I believe that's a broken. I think I thought I saw a front wing damage. I think that may be for a Speeder, and that could be crucial in deciding the hit P2 of this race if Speeder's front wing is broken, and it is. You can see that front right side is broken. It may have also done damage to the rear wing of Ella, but Speeder may have to actually opt to go for another pit stop here for a new front wing.
Yeah, and that's gonna, if he goes for that pit stop, he's gonna take another time hit, and I don't think he can afford to do that.
Is he gonna do it?
He's gonna stay out for now.
He's gonna stay out. I think potentially the strategy here for Speeder, if he is gonna go for, because he currently still has the faster tires than Ella. Ella's on some slightly older medium tires, and Nico has to be careful here not to get involved in this battle between Speeder and Ella, because he is drafting off of Ella, and you don't, if you are in that sixth position, you really don't want to cause issues for the rest of the race. But yeah, Speeder still, even with a broken wing, doing a great job of building a gap between himself and Ella, and this is what he needs to do if he wants. He may just try to carry on for the rest of this race with that broken wing.
Yeah, Nico needs to be very careful coming into that corner. He's getting very close to Ella there, and he doesn't want to. Oh, overtaken Ella there on that last corner. We didn't get to see that. He's just being a bit of a disruption to the rest of the grid there.
I believe he is because he's been overtaken now. He is ghosted, so he won't interfere with Ella on corners. He's basically racing by himself for the time being, so it shouldn't be too much of a hassle. But even with a broken front wing here, we're seeing Speeder gaining a second or two on Ella in this lap. So maybe that front wing damage may not be as bad as we thought. Maybe he's just being able to style it out and manage it. But yeah, technically here, Ella, to be fair, we could have actually seen, and actually sets the fastest lap of the race so far. It's potentially the shunt actually did more damage to Ella's car than we first thought, and maybe it's actually the, you know, Speeder can manage with a broken front wing, but maybe the damage to the back diffuser of Ella's car is worse.
Yeah, it does seem like that could be the case, being that within that one lap, or half a lap after that contact, Speeder was able to gain a 2-second lead on Ella, and closing down that 20-second gap between himself and Freedom.
And yeah, I do believe that collision occurred because Ella went for that inside line on that hairpin very commonly, and I think Speeder was thinking he could potentially try to, you know, go for it as well, and just a little bit of a harder braking than Speeder thought Ella was going to use, and he didn't slow down enough, didn't leave enough room, means that he shunted into the back of Ella, which is a bit unfortunate because, you know, even though he's, you know, gaining time trying to catch up to Freedom, we are actually we're gonna have to keep an eye on that time between himself and Freedom. Although I don't think he's going to be able to catch up the 20 seconds as long as Freedom is able to manage those hard tires. But Ella, again, just losing more and more time here to Speeder, and even though like he's on fresh tires, it shouldn't be this big of a gap. And yeah, we can see Ella's actually having to go into the pits here. So we're gonna stay on Ella here for a second. We're gonna see if there's anything else going on, just to see, because the biggest implication here is if they were able to stay out, if Ella was able to stay out on those medium tires, it meant that they could have just held on to this third position because of that gap between because of that pit stop gap between himself, Ella and Kai. But now, because of that extra pit stop, Ella's now going to be dropped down into 4th place, and Kai gonna walk onto that podium.
Yeah, and that's onto the softs. So we'll have, you know, fresher tires than Kai does on those softs, lot faster, but still now has a almost 6-second gap to catch up, and with only 5 laps left in this race, it's going to be interesting to see whether Ella can reclaim that podium finish from Kai.
And and just to keep track of what's going on with Speeder and Freedom, Speeder has caught up a second on Freedom in the last lap. Now, of course, there would have to be a major mistake from Freedom here. I think with only 4 laps remaining, Freedom is probably going to stick out on these hard tires, going to finish out just keep the gap as far away from Speeder as he can and do his best. But he has to be careful, because as we said, the tire degradation is going to continue to go up. He's been on these tires almost for 13 laps now. So he's going to see a lot more sliding, a lot less grip. So he's gonna have to be a bit more careful. A spin on any of these, you know, high-speed corners could make the difference between himself and Speeder. So has to be very careful.
Yeah, and as we've seen throughout this race, Freedom is very heavy and hard on those tires. So it's going to be interesting to see, can he stay out with that almost 20-second gap between himself and Speeder, which Speeder is slowly chipping away at. But he's going to have to be very careful on those hards, being that he's been out for so long on them. He was pushing quite hard at one point on them before he managed to take that pole position from Speeder. And it's going to be interesting to see how he handles the rest of this 4 laps of this race.
Yeah, Ella now has brought back 0.5 of a second to Kai. So those fast tires, to keep in mind, we're seeing Kai on some, you know, not super old, but some, you know, 5 or 6 lap old hard tires. Of course, because this is a half Grand Prix, the tire degradation would be double to what you're used to. So, you know, still going to be slowing down quite a bit. Ella catching up faster. That's another 0.5 second caught up by Ella in those last 2 corners. So Kai has to be careful. You know, he had the advantage due to that extra pit stop that Ella had to make. But now Ella, with those soft tires, like we said, if you go on the soft tires on that final stint, you can make up quite a bit of speed. Bit of squirmy exit to that corner from Ella, but still able to carry a lot of speed down these straights.
Yeah, and Kai is on those hard tires, which he's been out on them for what, 5 or 6 laps, so not super old, but Ella's definitely very quickly breaking down that gap between Kai and herself, and really just having that push. Caution on sector 1 there, but really having that push to kind of make up that time.
And the thing, yeah, if we just take of what Ella achieved in that last lap there, she was 1.5 seconds behind in that last lap, or she's gained 1.5 seconds on Kai in that last lap. So if that happens again this lap, if Kai makes that mistake at the hairpin, Ella's going to be very close to being within DRS range before, you know, about lap 27, which gives so many options for Ella to be able to try go for this podium position.
Yeah, Ella's definitely got that push, trying to make up that gap. As we see another almost 0.5 second broken down between the two of them, and really closing that gap and trying to get within that DRS range between themselves and Kai. And Kai's going to be having to think about having that battle happen very soon.
2 seconds now of a gap between Kai and Ella as we come down these back straights once again. Ella won't be able to get into DRS range for this main straight, just a bit too far, but this next lap is going to be where Ella starts to mount this attack here. Only half a second away from that DRS range. A mistake at the braking zone at the end of this corner could be the difference between or for the DRS detection zones for the next two, for the rest of this lap. Takes the corner nicely, still losing a little bit of time, but still try to make sure that that Ella is out of the DRS detection zones. 4.4 seconds away from it now.
Yeah, and Kai, we've seen, has lost a lot of time in the past 2 laps on that hairpin turn 10, and Ella's going to be taking full advantage of that. Within DRS now, coming down into turn 8, down into turn 9, and down that hill to turn 10, where Kai has been losing a lot of time.
Takes it quite a lot slower this time, just making sure that he can make sure he doesn't have any mistakes. But now DRS activated for Ella. Going to use that as much as possible to try to get it. Goes a little bit wide on the corner, but using as much of the track as possible. Try to, I think, potentially even stay in a little bit of clear air. Try to keep those tires a little bit cooler. That's the one problem. That's the one thing we could see with Ella having an issue, is if those tires start to overheat. Being on those softs, we saw how quickly they degraded for Speeder defending against Freedom. So trying to catch someone, you're going to get that extra heat coming off of the back of the person in front of your car. Got to increase that degradation. So we're going to have to see
within the DRS zone for that main straight in the stop-start line. Not going to make up much time though. Seems to be playing it safe and waiting for Kai to kind of slow down for those corners.
Yeah, and can keep continuously. That's the one thing about Bahrain, having those 3 different DRS straights means that you have a lot of opportunities to gain time, and then can use that really long one on the start finish straight to go for these, to try to mount these attacks. And there we can see the tire performance. They've both been on the tires for apparently about 9 laps. I believe Ella's is actually slightly newer, but the tire wear, not too much difference. The hard tires are actually doing quite a lot better in this track than we were thinking. A bit of a lock up there, that's gonna cause a little bit of time of a slowdown there, but still 0.5 of a second away. Has to try. Ella's gonna have to try to mount an attack shortly, because we're going into our final lap now. Freedom has passed the start finish line for it to start off that final lap. So we're going to see one more lap of racing for these 2 drivers, and it's all going to come down to this.
Yeah, and it seems that Ella's kind of putting that push on Kai, but not being able to as effectively late brake as Freedom has shown he's able to do throughout this race. But definitely going to be putting an attack on Kai now. Again, within that DRS zone, bringing it down to 0.2 of a second, going for the overtake. Gets it just by a hair.
Makes it stick, yeah, and that's the benefit of those soft tires, and as well as wearing down Kai over that time. Having Kai expend battery, expend tire wear, wearing him down, and now being able to burst into that podium position, and just greatly played by Ella in being able to go back from 10 seconds down to catching Kai on the final lap of the race.
And definitely is going to be trying to open up that gap so that Kai's no longer within DRS. There we go. It's about 1 second behind, 1.2 seconds there. Opening up that gap to try and secure that podium. There we see Freedom crossing the line with P1, and
Obituary going to finish up as well, who is a lap down, so we'll be finishing in P5. But now as we come around once again, Speeder going to be finishing that P2 position. Of course, had that 10-second time penalty, being a bit unfortunate, just not slowing down for that pit lane line. Of course, it is a very short pit lane entry. I think that's what caught those 2 people out. You're so used to having to slow down quite a bit, because it's usually like a tight corner or something. But now the battle for the final podium position, coming down to the last corner, Ella being able to put a gap between themselves and Kai, and that is going to be our P3 and P4. And that is going to be it for our Bahrain Grand Prix, with Ella finishing P3, or it's going to be Freedom finishing P1, Speeder finishing P2, and Ella finishing P3. And of course, our driver of the day being Ella, determined by the game itself. Ella going from, keep in mind, starting on the back of the grid, P6 had a big crash in qualifying, meaning that they were out of qualifying altogether, and then making it up in the race to be able to get back and, you know, finish on the podium. That's big points for them.
That was impressive driving from Ella. Definitely had a good tire strategy going into this race, being on the hards from the start, getting as many laps as possible on those hards, then switching to the mediums, and having that unfortunate bout with Speeder where there was damage done to Speeder's front right wing, but definitely being able, using that to their advantage, going onto the softs and taking that third position in the standings for this race.
Yeah, and fastest lap we're going to go to Speeder, a 1:30.2. Of course, no one was really targeting that fastest lap that race. They were just trying to do their best to make sure they didn't make any mistakes. It was a very squirrely race towards the second half, but that is it for our first race of the season. Freedom going to be starting us off as our first race winner, continuing his, you know, dominant streak that we've seen from him in previous series that we had, you know, last year, and our summer split, which was just a quick, you know, a couple of shorter races. I believe he won that as well. So starting off as he means to go on, I believe.
Yeah, and Freedom has. It's nice to see how things will shake up throughout the series, and we see that Freedom has that speed and that drive in him. Maybe a little hard on those tires, and will Speeder be able to take advantage of that?
Yeah, but we will have to see. Of course, we will be back next Friday for the second race. I believe you said it was which track was it?
Spain.
We are going to Spain.
In Spain, Circuit de Barcelona
next Friday. So we're going to see whether Freedom and or who comes out on top of next week. But thank you all for watching. We will see you next week. Have a lovely night.